employee-employer insurance arrangements.
This is often in like succession planning, determining, does the business need to take out a policy on the different owners of the business? Do the owners need to take out policies on each other, life insurance policies? Or do we need to have it on key employees? Because if they passed, then the business would be really impacted, and figuring that out, and we need to bring on somebody new. It all just really revolved around figuring out who needs life insurance on them because their death could negatively impact the business.
Yep. I die, now Bri's running the company with my wife, and like all of a sudden that becomes a challenge. Or does it have an insurance policy? It is an interesting thing. This is also one of those few areas that I often say child-free folks don't need life insurance unless, and this would be one of those unless you got to get bought out of a business or something along those lines.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bri and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, we are back talking to Bri about what does a CFP learn and how does it change because you're child-free. We are in the 5th course of 6. That's retirement planning and employee benefits. So, Bri, what's the high level of this one?
This is going to be what people typically think about when they think about financial planning is 401ks, IRAs, saving for retirement. This is in-depth version of all of those things. And the typical, just very normal retirement planning, I suppose.
That's fair. Before we even go into like the specific sections, question for you, because I was just talking to a reporter about this. What about if people choose not to retire? Was that in this at all? Or was it just like everybody must retire?
I don't think he said everybody must retire. It just said you needed to have a plan for retirement. Like it wasn't even a consideration that somebody might not retire. It was always presented as they're planning for retirement. So what do you need to do?
Well, and that's kind of my point is if you're going to follow that file lifestyle and retirement's not the plan, that's where we have to kind of alter this a little bit and see how it fits. All right. So the first section was on retirement needs analysis. So talk to me about what that means and like, how do you actually do the analysis?
Yeah. So this is going to be some goal setting. So the first thing when we talk about retirement is we need to figure out your goals. A lot of people say, this is what I want to do. This is how much I want to spend. That's great. But on what? What are you actually doing in retirement? Because right now you're probably working a career and have things kind of sorted out for the most part. What are you going to do in retirement? Whether that be your activities and then translating those into dollars, figuring out how much you need when you get there, how much you need to start saving right now, and where you should put your money. That was the main part.
So how do you actually do that math? I mean, is this where the 4% rule is in the stuff?
Some 4% rule in there. They didn't really talk too much about that, but it is breaking out your handy financial calculator and plugging things in. What's the time horizon? So how many years until retirement? How much can you save every year? And how are those taxes going to impact? It is figuring out all of those pieces of what you want in the future and then sitting down, putting the numbers in the calculator, and then it helps determine how much you need to save every year.
Yeah, I call it the 4% rule, by the way. Some CFP programs have like a 2-second mention of it. Some people have a little more. But keep in mind, that is rough back of the napkin math. So in this analysis, is really kind of like, let's dive into what happens if you live longer or retire earlier, or if your expenses are higher, or like back and forth. And I think it can seem very simple. Like you throw your answers into a retirement calculator, it gives you what you need. But that's all based on your assumptions. And I don't know about you, but I have no clue when I'm going to die, and prefer actually not knowing it. But that's part of this equation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was reading an article this week, like, well, if we plan to 95, are we over planning or are we under planning? Like, how do we? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, a typical retirement is 25 years. Personally, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be retired for more than 25 years because I got a lot of life to live. And I don't know that I can fit it all into 25, which is why I'm doing part of it now too.
Well, and that's 65 plus 25 is 90 years. Like that's the classic. It's funny. People ask me kind of like, when can I retire? What age? I'm like, age is like the least important question on this. What are your expenses? How are you doing it? What is your life going to be? But all right, number 2, qualified retirement plans.
Yes. Easy way to remember these. They are qualified to be tax deferred. So these are going to be like your traditional accounts, your 401k, where there is a qualifying thing where you put money in now. You don't have to pay taxes on the money. You pay taxes on the money later. A big thing with these is they cannot discriminate. They have to follow for them. And the employee takes on the risk with these because there's a couple of different types. The defined contribution, the employee takes on the risk, and then the defined benefit. That's when your employer is doing it for you and they're taking on the risk, and then will give you that money in retirement once you've fulfilled their requirements.
Yeah, and just a reminder, that's where we get Roth versus traditional, 401ks, 403bs, all the numbers. All those numbers, by the way, are all just random IRS numbers. One of the other ones you said, non-discrimination. Now, I want to call that out. That does not mean like, hey, I'm discriminating against race, sex, creed. Kind of, what does non-discrimination mean?
It is going to be more of like age discrimination. And as far as good example is like, you can't discriminate a lower paid employee versus a higher paid employee. It has to be offered to everybody. Oftentimes you'll hear about like, oh, well, the executives have options to do this. That's a different type of policy, because in those policies, which we'll talk about next, you can discriminate in those. This one is just saying you can't say you guys who are working the front lines are not as important, quote unquote, so we're not going to give you as many benefits. You can't do that.
Yeah, and you'll see this in your company 401k, like the match percentage has to be the same by everybody's in it. There's ones about like if somebody makes too much salary, does it mess it up? If certain people give, that's also why a lot of employers now are automatically enrolling you into 401k programs, is it helps them get past the tests. All right, number 3, third section is non-qualified plans.
Yes, so these are ones that can discriminate based off of, your employee status. And for executives, for example, I've seen before where sometimes companies will say, hey, our executives or our employees making over a certain amount can then also have access to this type of retirement account, not just the other one. It's all more subjective. You don't have to follow those rules and give everybody a fair shake.
Yeah, and the game here is you don't have to follow the rules, but you don't get as many benefits from a company standpoint, on some of these plans. And there's some limits on what's tax deductible, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that stuff is typically taxed now to the corporation.
Yep. Number 4, government 457 plans.
Love a good 457 plan. They are very similar to a 401k, with the exception that you can take the money out. It's called their deferred compensation, and they're offered by governments and nonprofits. So you can take the money out whenever you leave. There's no penalty. That 59.5% year is not there. It is whenever you leave. So if you are planning to retire earlier, then it's really good to put some money in there if you can and have access to it, because you can take it out without having to pay tax penalties. The same contribution limits apply. There are some funky rules for catch-up contributions in there, or special catch-up contributions. Those numbers change every year, but they're pretty similar right now. If you are 50 plus, it can only be for government, and that's the typical 7,500. There's a special one, the last 3 years of your service, you can put in up to double. This year it's 23,000 that can be put in there. And if you are in the last 3 years of your regular retirement, you can put another $23,000 in there. A lot of ways to put away a lot of money. Yep.
And just kind of a technicality on this. If your company offers a 401k, chances are they can't offer a 457 because
Correct.
401k is for profits. 403b is for nonprofits. And whenever I hear somebody say they have a 403b, my question is, well, do you have a 457? They're like, what the heck is that? And I'm like, well, that's deferred compensation. If you have both, you're actually better off filling up the 457 usually, because you get money, you can access to it right when after you leave, but they may not do the match. So you may have to do the match in the 403b, then do the 457. But here's kind of a fun one. If you work for a nonprofit government that has both a 403b and a 457, you can put 23 grand in each. And you can even, sometimes you'll see like a 401a or pension, sometimes you can actually stack 3 plans together. My wife had one of those, and I'm like, is this right? Like I had to like go look at it. I'm like, can she really put that much away at once? And the answer was, yeah, it just has to be in all these different plans. Usually you're not making enough money at government or nonprofit to put all that away, but that's a separate question.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. I'm like, well, it's great, but you have to be particular field.
Number 5 is other tax advantage retirement plans.
This was talking about IRAs, so individual retirement accounts that you can go and open on your own. You don't need an employer for, whether that be traditional, so you wait to pay taxes until you take the money out, or Roth, you pay the taxes now. Also covered the SEP IRAs, which are the simplified employee pensions. Simple IRAs, a lot of small employers will offer those, and they are, once again, sort of similar to a 401k, where you can get them through work, but the contribution is lower. 403bs, the government version of a 401k. There are some funky things in there. Those are the other options.
One of the things that confuses people a lot is there are income limits for like a Roth IRA, but there are not income limits for like a Roth 401k. So like this is where, like, depending on the plan, you can put different amounts at different times, and it gets super confusing. I'll say to people, hey, why don't you max out your 401k Roth? And they're like, well, over the income limit. I'm like, no, that doesn't exist. And by the way, remember, your max for your 401k is 23 grand, not however much the company matches. Your max for your IRA is at an individual level, and you have to have earned income. It gets kind of confusing pretty quick. I will tell you, for anyone listening, if you've heard about doing a backdoor Roth IRA, man, the amount of times I see somebody do it wrong, it's probably 80% of the time. Maybe even higher, depending on the day, because you have to do another tax form and you have to have certain accounts set up a certain way. So just be careful. All right, number 6, investment considerations for retirement plans.
This is time, risk, and suitability stuff. How long is it going to be until you retire? How much risk are you willing to take on and able to handle? That falls, are those suitable things for you? So a target date retirement fund that is with the year of 2030 is not going to be suitable for me in my 20s, whereas it might be suitable for somebody who is going to retire in 2030. That's where it fits. So making sure that your investments match your time horizon and your risk tolerance.
Yeah, the other thing here is your employer gets to pick those retirement plans, like what programs. And depending on who owns the 401k and all that, those options can be very good or really bad. Like I've had a few where I'm like, ooh, I almost don't want you to put your money in your 401k because the fees are that bad. So just be very aware of that. Just because it's a target date fund does not mean it's cheap. So you might see 2 different companies target date funds. One has 5% upfront fee and one has 0, and one has like, an annual fee of like 10 or 12 or 20 basis points, and the other one has 1%, like 10 times as much. It does matter. Sometimes sometimes you can convince your employer to get like good combination. Like, hey, can you fix this? Like this 401k program is terrible. Can you fix the investments? But it has to do with how they're paid. It's also why mutual funds are in your 401k, because the mutual funds pay for the fees for the 401k. But that's where it becomes a question about like, well, can I get better investments elsewhere? All right, number 7, distribution rules, alternatives, and taxation.
Yes. Often a question is, how am I going to get my money out? So this is talking about whether or not you can take it out bit by bit. If you need to take a lump sum, there's also loans you can take from your 401k. Don't suggest that on the typical path. Penalties. So anybody we were talking about earlier, the 401ks, if you take money out of that before 59.5, you're going to pay a penalty. It's 10%. And then also rollovers. So if we're moving companies, rolling over your old 401k to your new 401k, or possibly to an IRA, anything like that.
So I'm going to do the quiz question here. I'm younger than 59.5 and want to get access to my 401k without a penalty. What are my options?
Well, I guess I would ask, how old are you for the first question?
Just give me a couple different options depending on my age. Let's call it that.
Okay. So if you are 55 or older and not 59.5 and you have retired in that year, you can use the Rule 55 to take out money from your 401k. So it means you just have to retire from your company that you're working for and the 401k is at. in the calendar year in which you are 55, you're able to take money out. If you are not 55, if you are younger than that, you can also do a series of substantially equal payments. You have to figure out how much you want, and then you take out money. It has to be the exact same amount every single year, and you can take that out prior to 59 and a half and not have to pay penalties.
Yeah, so I'm calling that out because everybody's like, well, when it's in my 401k, it's locked up. I'm like, no, there's a way. You just have to do more paperwork. And tell you that series of payments, it has to be exactly the same every year, whether you want the money or not. But that's a math equation. We can figure out how much you take out, and that can be before 55. That can be when you're younger. And that's where I just think there's like this assumption, 59 and a half, 10%, like I have to. I will also tell you, I've done the math for some folks, and I'm like, you know what? We're just going to take a 10% penalty this year, and that's fine. Because you need the money, whatever it is, but we don't need the payments. There's ways. So just balancing. All right. Number 8, plan selection for businesses.
Oh, this is a fun one. This is deciding.
Is that as fun as estate planning? I know you love estate planning. That's next.
No, this is actually not that fun at all. That was very dry sarcasm. It's not that fun because it can be very hard to pick a plan. But this is going to be dependent upon both the owner's objectives and then also the business as a whole with their objectives. So how much money do you have to set up a retirement plan? What is your time horizon like? Do you want it to be more advantageous to people who are older, or do you want it to be more even across everybody? Figuring out what that looks like and putting it into place, because there are a lot of different options and they come with different advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so Bri had outlined a whole bunch of stuff on discrimination earlier. You can, depending on how you pick your plans, kind of discriminate and go, oh, I'm going to give more to the old people and more to the owners. Like, there are some tricks, let's call it that. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
And while we're there, Bri, while we're in plan selection, talk to me about if I'm like self-employed, what are my options?
Self-employed, you can use your typical IRAs if you want, but I would say the easiest option is going to be a solo 401k. So you set it up and then you fund it both as the employee and the employer. Overall, that's just going to be most simple. You can do a Keo plan. I can never pronounce that plan. That just takes a little bit more paperwork. But solo 401k would be where I'd send most people.
Or a SEP IRA is pretty easy. But there are options. And I call that out because people think like only a big business can have it. No, you got any 1099 income, you can set up your own solo 401k. Keep in mind that $23,000 limit is across all of your 401ks. So you have to be careful on that. All right. Number 9, employee benefit plans.
This is going to be like every October when people go through and review their benefits. It's not October for everybody. Let me just make that caveat. It can be October. In general, it is. But that would be your life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, anything that you get through your employer, picking those benefits, how they can be applied. There's options to give cash in lieu of benefits, how that looks. It is talking through the nitty gritty of all of that.
And also, of course, how it's taxed. By the way, I'm going to stop here at employee benefit plans for a second. So this is one of those where the child-free versus not is a big issue for me. Like, do we all have equal benefits? How do we get to choose it? How's that balance? This is probably going to be one of those that over time, they're going to have to figure out some alternatives, let's say, for that. What do you think, Bri?
Oh, benefits. I don't think there's a perfect answer for them. It is figuring out what a hopefully good enough answer is, which is unfortunate to have to say that, but there's not like a great answer because everybody's needs are so different. It is very, very hard to pick out what would be perfect for everyone.
And just a little behind the scenes, Bri is our Chief Experience Officer at Childfree Wealth and trying to figure this out for our team and how do you find the balance. And what was it? You lost a couple nights of sleep over trying to figure out health benefits? I'll tell you, for small businesses, it sucks.
Yeah. Last week, there was a night I was up till 3:30 in the morning trying to figure some things out, at least a start, and I'm not even anywhere close to figuring this out. So it's kind of my nightmare right now.
yeah, we're talking about the CFP review stuff, but one of those things about employee benefit plans is there is no right answer. It's not like this is the perfect for all your employees. This is equitable for everybody. No, like there's X amount of dollars we can spend, and how do we spend it best to help everybody? I don't know. We'll have to check back with Bri. We'll do a whole separate episode on how she picked the employee benefit for our team, so you can see it. It's like that's a nightmare for Bri, but it'd be a fun episode for me.
Glad one of us is having fun.
All right, number 10, employee-employer insurance arrangements.
This is often in like succession planning, determining does the business need to take out a policy on the different owners of the business? Do the owners need to take out policies on each other, life insurance policies? Or do we need to have it on key employees? Because if they passed, then the business would be really impacted, and figuring that out, and we need to bring on somebody new. It all just really revolved around figuring out who needs life insurance on them because their death could negatively impact the business.
Yep. I die. Now Bri's running the company with my wife. And like all of a sudden that becomes a challenge. Or does it have an insurance policy? It is an interesting thing. This is also one of those few areas that I often say child-free folks don't need life insurance unless, and this would be one of those unless you got to get bought out of a business or something along those lines. Although I always wonder at what point is there enough insurance that my wife wants to just knock me off to get the payment? I'm just saying there's probably enough. Oh, sorry.
Oh God. You cannot die on me. Somebody asked me about succession planning and I was like, please just, you got to live longer. I'm not ready.
Yeah, until you get the big enough insurance policy, man.
No, I still need you around.
All right. Number 11, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Fun stuff. So every person has to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. If you are self-employed, you're probably aware that it is 15.3%. If you are working in a W-2 job and your employer actually covers half of that for you. So they cover 7.65% of that. But it's just taxes that are put into a trust fund to pay benefits, essentially. Social Security you can receive if you are disabled or you reach whatever your specific age is, sometimes 65. We often say push off till 70. And then Medicare is going to be the healthcare. And Medicaid is what you can receive if you have under a certain asset amount. And that's the part where in long-term care, people often get confused Medicare versus Medicaid. Medicaid is what covers long-term care, but only after you've spent down your assets below a specific level.
Yeah, Medicare will only cover the first 90 days, maybe, and that depends on the qualification. Now, I want to go back here for a second to Social Security because a lot of people get confused on this. You're putting money away to Social Security. That money is not put aside for you. Okay, so I'm going to check with this, Bri, and see if you come up with the same understanding. When I read the stuff on Social Security, my answer was it looked a lot like a Ponzi scheme. Now, I'm not saying it's legally a Ponzi scheme, but like what it is Bri is currently paying in Social Security for people that are retired on the hope that when she retires at 60, whatever your full retire age, 68 or what it's going to be for you, probably 70 by the time you get there.
Yeah, probably.
But on the hope that some 20-year-old is going to be paying for hers. Now, this is where every time I do podcasts with the financial folks, they go, well, you child-free folks are messing up Social Security because you're not having enough kids to pay. I'm like, no, the system is messed up, okay? Like, it's based on, it has to have constant growth at the bottom to pay for the people that are aging. And you don't have an account with your name on it. And if the Social Security system runs out, you get nothing. Right now, I think it's 2035 or 2036. They're slated to serve about 70% of benefits. So in other words, run out of money. But I think when I started reading through Social Security, I'm like, this system is screwed up. I'm just going to say it. And what do you think, Bri?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we often have that conversation with younger clients too, who are like, I don't think Social Security is going to be around. I say, okay, I will just go ahead and cut your expected amount in our system, and that's fine with me if you're, because I can't provide comfort that it's going to be around when people my age reach that time.
Yeah, I'm Gen X, and for my personal plan, I cut all of my expected Social Security benefits by 25%. Figure I'm going to get 75 cents on the dollar. Is that a real number? No, that is like completely pulled out of my backside. Like it's not specific math number, but it's realistic. I think there will be some Social Security. How much? I don't know. I'll tell you, Bri, for your generation, I don't know that I plan on.
Yeah, I pulled it out, I think, completely in mine, I want to say.
Yeah.
I'll just assume the worst, hope for the best.
The other one on Social Security, remember, is there is a Social Security max. So I don't remember what it was for 2024.
It is $168,000, I believe. And some other, hold on. So yeah, $168,600.
So Bri gets to memorize all those for the test. I look it up on a sheet when a client asks.
It's on a sheet for me. That number's on a sheet. I just had to do a lot of those problems this weekend when I was studying.
So just kind of a reality check on that. What that means is if you earn $170,000, the last $2,000 of that, you don't get charged Social Security. So a lot of folks will be like, why is my paycheck higher in like November? Well, it's because you hit that max and now you don't have any extra dollars over it. It's just kind of one of those like little quirks of the system.
You still pay the little part of Medicare though, Medicare tax.
Yep.
Just the Social Security that's removed.
Yep. And the other one on Medicare is when you're in retirement, if you start making too much money, they charge you extra. That's the IRMA surcharge. So like there's all these like little quirks in the system, people don't think about. They're like, oh, well, I'm retired. I just start taking my money out. And then they'll get like an IRMA surcharge of like $306 a month or something like that. I think that's one of the ranges. And I had somebody hit that and they're like, what the heck is this charge every month? And it's like, you made too much money last year. Like that's, or you did too many Roth conversions or something. All right. Last section, number 12, regulatory considerations. Boy, do we have to love the regulations.
Oh, we do. We do. Pretty much saying the rule that says you can't discriminate is ERISA, Employee Retirement Income Security Act. So that says all the rules. Cannot discriminate along between your employees when it comes to qualified plans. You must follow those if you're using qualified plan. And you can also make sure to not contribute too much, because if you contribute too much, you will get in trouble.
Yeah. The other one here, and this is not on the test, but I do want to talk about because it just hit. Department of Labor is actually trying to change the rules of ERISA to see who's a fiduciary and not. Really interesting. I was just talking to a reporter about this. The insurance companies are lobbying against this rule because insurance companies are not required to be fiduciaries. They're not required to have your best interest in mind when they're making changes like putting you into annuity or other things. And now they're really mad because the Department of Labor is saying they have to be. It's kind of an interesting world. It's one of those like the regulatory stuff I hate because we have to do so much paperwork. I mean, compliance and the SEC and you just have to check a lot of boxes. It makes more paperwork, but at the same time, I kind of like that other people are held to the same standard. So our company, we are required to be fiduciaries on everything. Broker dealers are fiduciaries sometimes not. I don't understand that. And insurance companies are not fiduciaries. So it's really weird as you're looking through it. The other one on regulatory considerations, the person that holds your 401k is often required to be a fiduciary, and they're required to have your best interest. And it's interesting on what fees can they charge and still be a fiduciary. That one's going to be a kind of a hot button for a while, I think, but we'll see. Course 5 is on retirement planning and employee benefits. I'm assuming nowhere in here you didn't see any mention of being child-free. We were checking that on each section. We outlined a bunch of things that change when you're child-free. I think one of the ones on this whole section is, to me, as I'm reflecting on it now, it's been a few years since I've done this, retirement is the default choice, which is fine. But then if you choose not to retire, this whole section of how do you plan things, it gets challenged. Let's call it that. So we'll figure out that balance. Any last thoughts, Bri?
Not really. It was a good section.
Good section of all bunch of rules.
I think when people think about finances and planning, this is what they think about. It was nice to have more context behind some of the higher level stuff that we tend to see.
Yep. It is one of those. And I think it gets really interesting. Kind of putting your money away is somewhat simple because you've got the limits. It just does a thing. The one thing to keep on that is from your IRA, the IRS expects you to keep track of what were your contributions. Were they traditional? Were they Roth? Were you qualified? Were you over the limit? Which, by the way, if you're over the income limit, your custodian, Fidelity, Vanguard, whatever, will still take your contribution. They don't have a clue how much you make. So it is on you to understand these rules. I had somebody that we looked at and nope, they were over the limit for a few years, like 5 or 6. We had to go back and adjust their taxes, take money out, pay some penalty. You can pretty quickly run into issues when all you're doing, you're like, I just put money away. I don't think there's an issue. Be careful of it. I think the other one on your retirement plan is, as you retire, which funds you take out of where, at what time, how does it impact your taxes? Do I take my Roth, traditional? Really do get complex, and that's where you should use a little bit of help. They call it de-accumulation phase really is where it gets hard. Accumulating money, you just kind of mindlessly save, you can do okay, as long as you don't go over the limits.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.